I'm obviously out. We're doing 5.5, which is just trigonometry on the calculator. So it's kind of broken up into two lessons. There's a lesson A and a lesson B, but basically just being fluent with the calculator and understanding what the question's trying to ask you to do on your calculator. There is a classwork with this, but it's just on Schoology. I didn't think I needed to print it out. Um, so if you want to download that, you can, but you certainly don't think necessarily need to. But if you want to have it with you, you can. So there's really four types of problems that you're going to see with the calculator. Two of them would be inverses, and then the first two are just kind of typing in almost exactly as you see it, depending on the trig ratio. So make sure before you start that you do have your graphing calculators out and ready to go. So first one, typical example, find sine of 36 degrees 14 minutes. Really all you need to do is make sure on your calculator that you check the mode, right? Make sure if you're inputting degrees, be in degree mode, and then just enter the degrees in minutes using the angle button for the degree symbol and the minute symbol. And that's it. It's pretty self-explanatory. You just type it in exactly like you see it. So on our calculator, I'd want to hit the mode. Okay, I'm in radian mode. I'm going to go down. So I'm in degree mode. And then I'm just going to hit sine 36 degrees and 14 minutes. And you'll get an answer of 0.5911, right? Always be aware of what your answer is, right? So in this case, I'm finding a trig value. It wants sine of 36 degrees 14 minutes, right? It doesn't matter if it's a unit circle, what, it's just the sine of that angle, right? The ratio of the hypotenuse of the opposite over the hypotenuse. So whenever you're giving trig values like we are here, it's 4 decimals. So 0.5911 would be your final answer. So on your calculator, notice you do have a sine button, a cosine button, and a tangent button. So the second type of problem would be, well, what if you were asked to do cosecant of 36 degrees in 14 minutes, right? And you don't have a cosecant button. And you certainly don't want to use the inverse sine button because that's not cosecant. That's a totally different type of question. Inverse sine really has nothing to do with cosecant. We'll get into what those are a little bit in this lesson and then in 5.6 too. So if I needed to find cosecant of 36 degrees in 14 minutes, it's the exact same thing as finding sine of 36 degrees in 14 minutes, but I just want to basically make it a reciprocal and then I'd be done. So here we're going to check the mode again and then basically enter the degrees in minutes for the reciprocal function, which is sine. So I'm going to hit sine of 36 degrees 14 minutes. And then after that, this is going to give me the same answer as this, right? So how do I make this into cosecant? Well, sine is 1 over, cosecant is 1 over sine. So all I could do, a couple ways you could do it, hit the -1 button after the parentheses, right? So what that's going to do is make it inverse. So I'm going to close out the parentheses and then do to the -1. And that's the same thing as 1 over sine of 36 degrees in 14 minutes, right? And then I get an answer of, again, it's a trig value, cosecant value. It's the radius over the opposite, which the radius has to be the biggest side in a right triangle. So your answer is bigger than 1, which it always should be. That makes total sense. So you have 1.6918, and that would be your final answer. So that's kind of how you would do that problem. Or if you wanted to, you could have just done 1 divided by, and then just hit sine of 36 degrees and 14 minutes. And you would have gotten the same thing, right? Either one is the exact same thing. This -1 is just basically an exponent of -1. It's moving, it's changing it so it's 1 over that. So it doesn't really matter how you do it, but it's kind of a one-shot deal. And then for mini lesson part B, it's finding angles when I give you the trig function value. So this is where it's like an inverse, right? If you switch x and y, it's kind of like Now you're inputting the trig function value and you're finding the angle. Whereas before, I was giving you the angle, you were finding the trig function value. So these are inverses. Not reciprocal is a very different thing. So here, find the angle in degrees whose sine is 0.3223. So I'm giving you the trig value and telling you its sine. I want to know the angle where basically the sine is that value. So we're going to same thing. We're going to check the mode. It tells me I need to get it in degrees, so I want to be in degree mode. And then basically I'm going to do the inverse trig button and then hit the decimal. So here I'm going to hit second sine. So this is an inverse problem. So this -1 doesn't mean 1 over. It's like f inverse of x. Kind of means the same thing. So inverse sine of 0.3223. And I'm in degree mode. So my answer is 18 degrees, 0.8. Most of these questions are going to be to the nearest minute. So I'm just going to convert this to degrees, minutes, and seconds. So it's 18 degrees, 48 minutes because 7 seconds would round down. Right, so 18 degrees, 48 minutes, and then you'll be done. All right, we did that one. All right, last question here. This would be the hardest probably type of question you'd see for today's stuff, kind of. So we have find an angle in radians whose secant is 2.3945. So the first thing you notice is I have a trig value. I'm finding the angle. It wants to be in radians. First thing I do is go to radian mode. Now I need the secant is equal to 2.3945. So check mode. I'm in radians. Already did it. Now again, I don't have a secant button, but if you think about secant, it's the reciprocal of cosine, and I need to find an angle. So if I'm thinking I need to find an angle, it's going to be one of the inverses. It's inverse sine, inverse cosine, inverse tangent. So with secant, I don't have it, so I'm going to hit inverse cosine, because that's the reciprocal of it, and then 2.3945. 2.3945. So what we're going to do is now I'm going to hit enter and we'll try and explain what happens. So it says error, right? It says error with this. Well, why would this be an error? Well, this is basically, if you can read this, this is saying what is the angle, because it's an inverse, what is the angle where the cosine value is 2.3945? To a calculator, and to me it doesn't make any sense, because cosine is a ratio of, basically it's x over r, right? So it's the ratio of the adjacent side over the hypotenuse, or the adjacent x over the radius. Well, the radius has to be the biggest side, right? So there's no way that x over r, or adjacent over hypotenuse, would ever be something bigger than 1, because that would be like x would have to be a bigger number than r, which it can never be. So that's kind of why your calculator is saying error. There's a problem here. So I don't need the angle whose cosine is 2.3945. It doesn't exist anyways. I need the angle whose secant. So all I need to do now is do the reciprocal and then close off the parenthesis. Right? You don't want to do it after. You want to do it before. So what that's going to do is change it to basically 1 over 2.3945, which would kind of get me back to secant. And then I have my answer of 1.14 radians, right? So the angle, right? So if I took away this -1, it's the angle whose cosine is 2.3945. If I do this -1, it changes it to secant. So now I'm finding the angle, because this inverse designates angle, of, I'm trying to find the angle whose not cosine because of this -1. Now it's secant. 2.3945. So I get 1.14 radians, right? And that's it. So all that means is r over x at 1.14 radians is going to be 2.3945, right? And that's kind of it. So we kind of call that a double whammy because you had two -1s in your thing. Obviously, they mean totally different things. This one means secant. This one means finding the angle. This one means inverse. This one means reciprocal. So they mean very different things, but it's the same symbol. All right, and then we're going to do this question really quick. So I kind of want you to pause the video, give this one a shot, and then we'll go through it. All right, so this one says find, so it's cosecant of theta is equal to 2 over cotangent of 29 degrees. So now it wants radians, but if you think about it, the first thing that you would type in would have to be degrees. So you don't want to be in radian mode. You actually want to be in degree mode, even though the final answer is in radians. The first step is going to be inputting degrees. So 2 over cotangent of 29 degrees. You can do, that's really the same thing as tangent of 29 degrees, right? Because it's kind of in the denominator. So it's the same thing as 2 times tangent of, or I should say 2 tangent of 29 degrees. But you don't have to do it like that if you want. You could just get cotangent of 29 degrees. So I'm going to input degrees, so I actually want to be in degree mode. And I need cotangent of 29 degrees. Well, I don't have cotangent, I only have tangent, but it's certainly not a reciprocal because I have the angle given to me. So I'm going to hit tangent of 29, and you can hit degrees, but if you're in degree mode, it'll do degrees. And then just do the inverse. Right, so that's cotangent of 29 degrees, 1.804, something, something, something. And I need 2 divided by that. So I got 1.1086. Keep in mind if I just did 2 tan of 29, because I said that basically if you have the cotangent in the denominator, the same thing as 2 tangent. If you just did it that way, then you would have gotten the same answer. So basically I have an equation, cosecant of theta is equal to 1.1086. You know, I'm going to leave dot, dot, dot because I want to keep the rest of the decimals, but that's pretty much what it's equal to. So if I think about that, right, cosecant of theta is this. I need to know what the angle is given its cosecant, right? So this is your trig value, 4 decimals. I need to find the angle, right? And now it needs to be in radians. I want the angle in radians. So I'm actually going to switch it over because this doesn't mean anything to do with angles. This is the trig value. I'm going to switch over to radians to get my final answer. And again, I need an angle, so that means inverse. If you need an angle, you got to do the inverse. So I don't have an inverse cosecant button, right? Technically, the equation would be, if you did, you would want to do cosecant, inverse cosecant to both sides. Whoops. And then basically that just gets theta by itself. That's kind of the algebra part behind it. But all you really need to know is I need the angle, so I need to do the inverse cosecant of my trig value. So if you think about it, I don't have an inverse cosecant, but I do have an inverse sine. That's the closest I'm going to get. And then I'm inputting, so I'm finding the angle whose cosecant is this. So I'm just going to hit answer so I can get all of those decimals in there. And then I need to put the -1 on the inside. And that will change it from a question whose sine is equal to this, which again wouldn't exist because it's bigger than 1, to answering the question whose cosecant. So this -1 represents the cosecant. This -1 means I'm trying to find the angle, right, the inverse. So when I do that, I'm in radian mode. I get 1.12. So approximately 1.12 radians. Right, so pretty much at 1.12 radians, I have an angle whose cosecant value is 1.1086, and that's what the question is basically asking. So now that you're done with this part, just kind of work in groups of 2 or 3. Whenever you finish, kind of look around, see who else is done. And then just do the 5.5 activity, which is on Schoology. There's a key there for you too. And then if you do finish that, which is probably going to happen just because it's not a long video, just start the homework and then you'll be done.